It seems like everybody kind of hates influencers these days. It's not a real job. Well, it's not hard work. Influencers are so entitled. They don't offer any value. They're just rich people showing off. There's no doubt a lot of negativity directed towards influencers and content creators, if there's even a difference between those two things. We'll talk more about that later. But is all this criticism warranted? As someone who is personally, obviously invested in the online world, I want to dive in to this discourse and dissect the current swell of negativity that influencers are facing right now. We're going to discuss how much of this criticism is fair and warranted, which I think some of it kind of is, but definitely not all. And I want to talk about how much of it is motivated by something much more sinister than simply petty bitterness or online hate. And I personally believe that the haters and critics of influencers don't even realize how influenced they are by this major factor. By the way, thanks to Storyblocks for sponsoring a portion of today's video. And welcome back to Coffee Chats with Katie, my series where we dive deep into the big conversations around social media and the online world of content creation. So grab your favorite beverage and let's get into it. It's not a real job. This is like the oldest critique in the book when it comes to influencers, and you hear it all the time, even now. Here's the thing. Undoubtedly, the most famous kind of influencer, the one that we're all familiar with and that pops into mind when you hear the term influencer, is lifestyle influencer. People who share stuff like fashion, food, travel, their everyday lives. And of course, as the audience seeing that content, we assume that this is an accurate portrayal of that person's day-to-day life. And look, I'm sure to some extent it is. Those are the meals they're eating and the places they're going. But the thing that most influencers don't show is the admin, the editing, the meetings with brands, the planning of their content, how sweaty and annoying it is to film, I feel like that right now because the general audience isn't really interested in the behind the scenes of content creation. I mean, I know all of you are. That's the kind of thing I like to share in my content, but I'm a lot more niche than like the average influencer. Most people who are following like Emma Chamberlain or Alex Earl, they're not interested in being influencers themselves. They just want to see what these interesting people are doing with their lives. Obviously, interesting's in the eye of the beholder. The point is, a lifestyle influencer's job is not to really show you their job. It's to show you their life. They want their content to be fun, entertaining, depict an aspirational lifestyle. And for most people, that's not going to include the boring and tedious parts of creating content. And so that's why when you look at these creators, Instagrams or their YouTube channels, it doesn't really look like they're doing a job because they're intentionally not showing you the job part of being an influencer. They're showing you the fun parts, which are fun to watch. I actually came across a TikTok on my For You page the other day, which I think is the perfect representation of this.
During Coachella, I posted 6 to 7 times a day. I created mood boards of every single look. And when my mood boards were done, I started to create a content plan. Like, I want to do transition. Don't forget to take photos at the festival. I want to do a makeup video, but I also want to do a hair video. Created a list for every single day of the festival, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in order of when I was going to film. I listed out my entire content plan for every single day, down to the first thing I do in the morning is start the transition. Then I put down my next video, and then it was finished transition. So throughout the day when I was filming everything, I would check it off once it was done filming.
See, even the content that comes across as super casual and off the cuff is actually painstakingly and intentionally planned out. If you want to get that perfect transition, you have to be thinking about that hours in advance. If you decide to do it once you've already gotten ready, then you've lost your chance. Influencers are essentially mini self-contained advertising agencies with the entertainment built in. It's kind of like if you would combine a reality TV star with the network executive and with the ad agency, and that's all in one person. When you think about it, it's actually a huge variety of different jobs that an influencer is doing all at once. They're fake. So a lot of critics of influencers, they see them as inauthentic or fake at best, and at worst as straight up lying to their audiences, with lying and brand deals being like the cardinal sin that an influencer can commit. And I definitely understand this critique on the surface because, like I mentioned in the previous point, there's always going to be stuff that an influencer doesn't share. And I know that the vibe that you get off the bat from an influencer's content is that you're following them through their life. You get to see their day-to-day, you know them. People really, have a parasocial relationship with the people that they follow. And so then it can be kind of jarring to realize that there's maybe big parts of their life that they aren't sharing with you. And that kind of makes you feel like they're being fake. But the truth is, in life, even with our real life relationships, there's parts of ourselves that we don't fully share with every single person we know. Like, you don't necessarily share your intimate, family conflicts with your coworkers, for example. We all have parts of our lives that we pick and choose when and where we want to share them. And I personally don't see that as being inauthentic or fake. I just see that as being human. But even if we can accept that, there are certainly, fair critiques of influencers being dishonest, specifically in brand deals, that I think we can all agree is very unethical. Okay, so at this point in the video, we do need to talk about Mascara Gate. In case you're not chronically online like me, Mascara Gate refers to a brand deal, TikTok, that super famous beauty influencer Michaela Noguera did a few years ago now. It was a brand deal with a L'Oreal mascara, and she was accused of putting on false eyelashes before the final reveal shot, demonstrating, how good this mascara was. I'm not a mascara expert, so I'm not going to comment on whether or not I think that's what she did, but that's certainly what everybody on the internet has agreed she did. But even above and beyond that, the ad wasn't properly disclosed. Behind the caption on the video, so behind the TikTok UI, there was a little text that said L'Oreal partner, but the paid partnership box hadn't been checked on the video, so it didn't have that proper label. This was a huge upset on TikTok, and everybody was talking about it for weeks. I mean, we're still talking about it today. Obviously, false advertising and misleading your audience is really, really bad. And the non-disclosure thing is just straight up illegal. I mention this because I want to admit that there are some pretty high profile examples of influencers being dishonest in their brand deals. It's happened before, it'll probably happen again. But even with those really, glaring examples, on the whole, I would argue the influencer marketing industry is actually pretty highly regulated when it comes to the disclosure of ads. Actually, more so than traditional media. You might be surprised to find out that there's actually no laws requiring movies, TV shows, music videos to disclose when they include product placement, for example. And in that exact same situation, an influencer would be legally required to look down the barrel of the camera and say, "Thanks so much to Beats for sponsoring my music video." FTC guidelines require that influencers both verbally and visually disclose when a piece of content is sponsored, and there's no equivalent requirement for traditional media. I feel like at least several years ago, people would have made the argument well, we all grew up with music videos and TV and movies, and we have this implicit understanding that when we see a brand in these things, it must be, product placement or advertising. But the world of influencers, it's just so new, and it really just feels like you're talking to a friend online, and so we need to have this extra disclosure to make it really obvious. I don't really buy that argument myself. I personally feel like we should have just as high as standards for traditional media for disclosing advertising. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I just don't believe that, people's media literacy extends so far as TV and movies, but then once you get on YouTube, it goes out the window. So realistically, all paid advertising, no matter the medium that it appears in, I think should be properly, and explicitly disclosed. That conversation aside, though, I think we can acknowledge that influencers are in reality actually held to quite a high standard when it comes to disclosing their advertising and their relationships with brands. Yes, sometimes people do break the rules, as they do, but the rules do exist, and the vast majority of influencers are complying with their FTC regulations in their content because their job depends on them following those rules. Most brands are not going to want to risk being wrapped up in a Mascara Gate style scandal, so they also want to work with influencers that are properly following the regulations. Not to mention the fact that once an audience starts to feel like an influencer is being a little bit dishonest or duplicitous, they're much less likely to continue following them and engaging with their content. I really feel like an influencer's number one currency is their authenticity, or at least their perception as being honest with their audience. As soon as you lose that, I just feel like your whole business crumbles. As an influencer, if people don't believe you, you kind of have no influence left. So I would argue when it comes to whether or not influencers are fake, I think almost more than in many other jobs, influencers' honesty is required in order for them to continue being successful. It's not a hard job. Okay, so unfortunately we need to talk about Michaela Noguera again. I swear I'm not trying to drag her, and actually I just want to say I am really not a fan of takedown content or videos that specifically go into dissecting why one person is like so bad or whatever. I think it's unnecessarily mean. I think, come on, we can critique people's bad actions without like making our entire personalities about hating on that person. So Michaela, if by some random chance you're watching this, I don't hate you, girl. I think actually the internet's done you kind of dirty, so hope you're doing okay. However, Michaela was at the center of another controversy, which I think is central to this conversation about whether or not influencing is hard work.
Every single day, I get up at 6 a.m. I spend about 5 to 6 hours filming video content that ranges from 3 to 4 videos, and then I spend a few hours editing that video content. Then I have to work on my other social media profiles, whatever it may be, Instagram, whatever. It's marketing. Then I'm in meetings from 12 to 5. I literally just finished work and it's 5:19. Try being an influencer for a day.
Now, of course, this video, I could have told you before it ever ended up on the old TikTok that it was not going to be well received. I'll tell you why in a second, but first I want to say something a little controversial, which is I don't think she's actually that wrong. But I do think that the way that she said it meant that people were never going to take the words that she was saying at face value. Like, I think this video was kind of blown way out of proportion and ended up being like crazy viral. And the reason that a lot of people hate on this girl, and I think it's because she's talking in this kind of like annoyed and aggressive tone, and people are not going to take kindly to that because nobody likes to hear influencers complaining. Nobody likes to hear someone that they perceive to be in a better position than themselves complaining about their life. It's the same exact reason why people are really hating on Chappell Roan these days. They don't have patience for a celebrity having anything negative to say. Whether or not that's fair, that's its own conversation, but it's just the way that it is. Specifically though, I remember people at the time really freaking out and emphasizing the fact that she says that she worked until 5:19 and implying that as if she was saying like, oh, it's so difficult. I worked until 5:19. Like, can you believe how late I'm working? And I think that that was an unfair reading of what she said, because I don't think that she was implying, oh, I've like worked so late. She was just saying, I worked until 5. Like, you can see she's replying to a comment of someone saying like, try working a 9 to 5. And she was kind of trying to say in the video, like, my job is kind of more or less like a marketing 9 to 5. And I think that's a fair response. But I think the way that she said it, nobody was going to want to hear it like that. Anyway, I'm not here to rehash this old discourse. There's been enough talk about it already, but I do want to kind of try to address this question of, is being an influencer a hard job? And hopefully do it in a way that was a little bit more nuanced than poor Michaela's TikTok. Okay, so is being an influencer a hard job? Yes and no. No, in that it's not physically taxing. You get paid very well for what you do. Once you make it, that is. I do want to like make a distinction here. We need to remember that becoming an influencer actually necessitates months, if not years, of free labor, because you've got to grow your audience to a certain extent before you can really start monetizing it. I saw someone say in a TikTok once that being an influencer isn't hard, but becoming an influencer is. And I do think that's a helpful distinction, because yes, once you have the audience and you've kind of got that business model established, it's not hard in the way that being a nurse or a firefighter is hard. Trust me, I'm personally very aware of this because I come from a very like blue collar family background, and I know that my brother, who's a truck driver and works 14 hours a day, is working harder than me, who's sitting at home talking to a camera right now. I have no problem admitting that. However, I would argue that being an influencer can be difficult in an emotional and like psychological sense. As a small business owner, which the majority of influencers are, there are just like a lot of responsibilities and stuff that can weigh on you mentally, especially once you have a team. Like, I will say, of my whole job, the thing that weighs on me most is the responsibility of making sure that enough business is coming in to keep my team employed. Because I care about these people and I know they depend on me for their income, so I take that responsibility very seriously. And that is kind of its own like emotional weight you have to deal with. That's not specific to being an influencer though. Like, you know, my mom who owns a restaurant in a small town, she has that too. But I think it's fair to say that's something that influencers often deal with. But beyond that, there is kind of this unique and strange dynamic to being an influencer, because you are in some ways like a minor public figure and you're dealing with the scrutiny and criticism and judgment that comes with that. I think that's very hard to measure and very hard to communicate. It's honestly difficult to imagine until you experience it yourself, which is why I think that there can be a little bit of a lack of like empathy or compassion for people in that situation, because And look, I relate to this too, because I felt this way when I spent, 10 years wanting to become a big content creator and not getting there. I had no sympathy for people that would complain about the judgment or the scrutiny of like being internet famous. I'd be like, yeah, but you make so much money and it seems so cool and I just want to do that. So like, I really understand people not being empathetic about it because it's one of, I think, the hardest things to imagine until you're in that position yourself. So I don't know. You may argue with me in the comments and say that it's not legitimate, but I do feel that that is a factor in what can make having this job, at least emotionally difficult at times. So with all that being said though, whether or not being an influencer is or isn't, oh, my screensaver, how long has that been up for? Sorry about that. With all of that being said though, I kind of want to take this in a slightly different direction because whether or not being an influencer is or isn't a hard job, I don't actually think is the reason that people get annoyed or hate on influencers. Like, do people actually really care whether or not it's a hard job? Because I'll let you in on a little secret. There is a whole industry of people that are making six-figure salaries, sitting on their laptops in Zoom meetings all day, saying stuff like, let's not boil the ocean, or we'll take that offline. And I do not see this level of hate directed towards people who work in like corporate tech in the same way we see it directed towards influencers. And by the way, I just want to say, I don't want to hate on them either. I say, girl, get your bag. If you can basically quiet quit at one of these mega corporations and still make a great salary, go for it. I'm not judging you. But what I am saying is, I actually don't think that influencing being an easy job or not a real job at all are the real reasons why people hate on influencers so much. I think those are kind of excuses in a way. There's a deeper reason at play here that I think a lot of people aren't willing to talk about, which we will talk about in a second. But first, I need to address the real elephant in the room here, which is the beautiful and professional stock footage that you've seen throughout this video. I got it from Storyblocks, the sponsor of today's video. Storyblocks is my go-to site for media assets to use in my YouTube videos, from stock footage to sound effects to background music and animation templates. Storyblocks has a massive library of high quality media that you're allowed to use in your content, copyright strike free. And you can get it all with one subscription fee, so you don't have to stress about an exclusive pay-per-clip system. Especially if you want to make video essay format YouTube videos like this one, Storyblocks is going to be your best friend, because you can get beautiful and engaging clips that are relevant to what you're talking about to help spice your video up visually. So head over to storyblocks.com/Katie to try it out for yourself to get unlimited downloads of high quality stock footage to use in your videos. And once again, thanks to Storyblocks for making today's video possible. Okay, so the real reason at the heart of all of this hate directed towards influencers, in my opinion, is misogyny. Just good old-fashioned sexism. Women in our society, especially those in the public eye, are under a microscope that demands perfection. And women's work historically and today has been undervalued. Take, for example, the field of computer programming. You might not know that when this field emerged during World War II, it was actually seen as women's work. It's kind of a female-dominated industry. I personally see something similar kind of happening in the influencer industry right now. Men who create content online really distance themselves from the influencer label, and in fact, I think all of us as a society are actually less likely to label them as such. Like, when you just think of the word influencer, the image that pops into your mind, like, it's not going to be a dude. Like, people do not say that Joe Rogan is an influencer. They say that he's a podcaster. Men that do influencer work are commonly seen as entrepreneurs, business owners, maybe content creators or podcasters or YouTubers, but you rarely hear them called influencers. Even though, similar to computer programming, influencing was pioneered by women, specifically by mom bloggers in the early 2000s. And now, in 2025, the top earning influencers are men. According to Taylor Loren's recent article titled The YouTube Gender Gap, among the top 50 individual YouTube creators by subscribers, only 7 are female, and just 3 of them are adult women. And according to one recent report from Collabster, male creators earn 40% more per collaboration than female creators. I think this also ties back to the larger conversation about influencer versus content creator that I alluded to before. Like, I never call myself an influencer, right? I would call myself a content creator because it somehow feels cringy to say that I'm an influencer. But the more that I was thinking about this as I was writing this script, this whole concept of people distancing themselves themselves from the term influencer and saying like, no, I'm a content creator. It's giving a little bit, I'm not like other girls kind of vibe. So I don't know. I'm guilty of that myself. Maybe I shouldn't be afraid of the term. You can let me know how you feel about that in the comments, but I do think that there is undoubtedly a gendered aspect to it, even at the risk that some people might hate me for this in the comment section. If I'm totally honest, I think that a lot of the hate and negativity directed towards influencers comes down to two major factors, and that's misogyny and I think a little bit of jealousy. Not every critique is based in envy, and I would never say that like anybody who's ever criticized an influencer for something genuinely problematic is just bitter or jealous. Like I don't think that. I certainly don't think that influencers are above reproach, and I think that, you know, people that have a large platform should also have accountability. So I'm not trying to say that like every influencer is perfect and not capable of doing any wrong. Obviously we are, but I do think that a lot of negativity towards the job as a whole, or like the job as a concept, comes from a place of judging women, seeing women's work as less valuable or more superficial or unnecessary. And then also from some people from a place of like, oh wow, this is a really cool job for which people get paid really well. I kind of wish I was doing that. I know for me, part of the judgment that I had towards different influencers in the past definitely came from a place of jealousy. So I feel confident saying that that exists because I went through that myself. I'm not saying that like, oh, everybody wants to be an influencer. Like you're just jealous of me. Like I don't believe that. But I think that that is at least a small component for some people. Unfortunately, I just think if there's one thing that we love as a society, it's tearing down women specifically who have become really successful. Everyone loves an underdog story, okay? We love seeing somebody come up from behind. But once we start to see that person as like consistently successful and doing well for themselves, not to bring it back to the Chapel Roan of it all, but I feel like we start to turn on them when that happens. I just think the way the public perception of Chapel specifically has swung like a pendulum completely to the opposite side in just the past year is like a perfect example of that. It's interesting. It's all very interesting to think about. I think a lot of people might feel like this conversation is a little bit like silly and unnecessary, but I know many of you who watch my channel are currently pursuing work as a content creator or an influencer. And so this is definitely something to consider. Like it is a weird kind of space to operate in when you're pursuing this job that like gets so much flack online. It's kind of a weird thing. So I thought I would share my 2 cents on it. So influencers out there, just know that, you know, I think you have a real job. I think how easy or difficult it is actually doesn't have a lot to do with why people may or may not criticize you. It's obviously of the utmost importance to maintain your integrity, your honesty, and your ethics, as it is for any human individual, but, you know, especially when you have a platform. But I think just keep doing your job and keep enjoying it, because in my opinion, it is a real job, just like any other. I hope you liked this video, this kind of interesting conversation, and let me know if you want to see more coffee chats like this, because after being a full-time content creator for like the past 5 years or so, I certainly have a lot of thoughts about the industry that we could dive into. Be curious to hear your thoughts on the topic in the comments below, and if you like this style of video, you might want to watch this one next. Make sure to check out Storyblogs for all of your stock media needs, and as always, I hope that you're having adventures and following your dreams, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!